Thank you for joining me, fellow Guardians. This is Sam from Multiverse Mission Control, and today's quest is learning video games. Platformers are likely the best starting genre you will ever find to introduce yourself to the medium. There may be a few extra bells and whistles here and there, but at the end of the day, at its core, a platformer game is just your goal on the other side of an obstacle course and you either making it or not. Just very cut and dry. Your character is often not some overpowered Mary Sue, but someone weak and fragile, just as we all might feel sometimes. The enemies you're up against? Stronger, faster, more durable. The gaps you need to cross? Often bottomless, and lined with such evolutionary fears as fire and pointy things. Succeeding at various challenges isn't something that's all cool and edgy. It's a frantic, oh god, what do I do? But that occasionally somehow ends in success. Intentional! You all saw it! You might even feel like you're cheating, like you shouldn't have survived what you just did. That at any moment there's going to be that challenge around the corner that's just going to prove to be too much, that will require skills that you somehow should have learned by now. But then, upon finishing a platformer, you turn around, you look at all the things you just got past, and you're like... You come to a realization. I'm a beast! That's why I recommend a platformer to really help you nail the basics of gaming. They are meeting you at your level. Your character is a total wimp who will get flattened in an instant. The learning process consists of confused and desperate button mashing more often than not. But unlike a horror game, the world itself is bright, colorful, and beautifully inviting. And the developers give you just enough abilities to make it feel like you have some agency in the world and make it through anyway. You may die numerous times, but then comes the moment where it just kind of clicks, and you become a force to be reckoned with. So anyway, how exactly does one platform? Well, before anything else, what's the camera doing? Is it fixed, or does it follow you? Can you control it at all? If so, how responsive is it? If it's a third-person game, like a third-person 3D game, does the camera get stuck on walls? Yeah, that happens. Or, weirder still, does it go through the walls, and how easily can you see when that's the case? Ideally, you and the camera should be working together, not fighting each other. Next, you should identify how to move. And I don't mean just leaning on the control stick or the D-pad. I mean, like, what all are you able to do? What is the extent of your character's abilities? How high can you jump? How far can you jump? Is it hard to stop? Is momentum realistic, or can you alter your jump mid-air? Do you have a double jump, or a dodge roll, or some nifty gimmick move that the game is based around? Can certain moves chain together, one after another? Is a move weird to time? Could you see how you might use this move in certain hectic situations? Make the effort to experiment and familiarize yourself with your new character. This is the new suit that you're putting on. You should know how freely you can move and not let anything trip you up. Also, you may remember from my input episode about direction plus action, your thumbs need to move as one at the same time. Most of the time, you just lean into both and trust that you'll make it. However, if you need a short hop, then you'll need to practice pushing and releasing with both until you can tighten that window. Now, once you know how to move, the next part of forming the mindset, and bear with me here because it's gonna sound a little weird, is to think of each move like an item in a point-and-click adventure game. I know, it sounds weird, but there is a method to my madness. If you've ever played a point-and-click, you know that you have each item in your inventory that can or must be used a certain way, right? And sometimes you have to combine items together to make a new item or use each item in a specific order. In those kinds of games, you basically rub all your items on the problem until it goes away, right? So if you think of each move, each way to use a move, and each way to combine a move as individual items, then it becomes less a question of skill, like am I fast enough or am I dexterous enough, and more like which of my many tricks do I use here? This is basically how I thought of it growing up. And that's not just because I'm on the spectrum, although that may certainly be part of it. Platformer games tend to emulate puzzle games or blend their mechanics with such pretty synchronously, often to the point of being indistinguishable. Puzzle platformer is a very common term used to describe games in this genre. Even if a platformer doesn't openly identify as a puzzle game, there are still elements of that kind of logic in the design. After all, it's all about finding a set, distinguishable way through the course from point A to point B. Here's a fun trick. If you have a friend who feels like they're dumb but they play a lot of platformers, set them down with like Portal or Ratchet and Clank or something, and ask them how to get through a level. Well, first you jump through this thing, which launches you to that thing, and then you use that trick you learned, and this, that, and then they will just start rattling it off like someone designing a computer program. And then they actually do it, and it's like, zip, 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 zip. Oh god, how do my eyes follow this? The analytical mind comes into play more than people realize with platformers, especially when you have a moment to pause and observe the obstacles ahead. So anyway, back to the main point. Items in the inventory. For instance, a short hop would be one item, but then you hold the jump button a little longer and it becomes a long hop, and that's a different item. Different move, different item. Heck, even some things in the environment can become an item as far as you're concerned. Climbing a rope? That's an item. Or like, I know this conveyor belt speeds me up, which usually leads to my death, but what if I use the increased speed to lengthen my jump and yes! Gave me enough momentum. Or, when I was learning how to play Portal, moving the portals around was one item, moving through them was another item, but then, when I figured out how to use the velocity of my fall to reach higher ledges, I dubbed it the velocity jump. From then on, I asked myself if I needed to jam a velocity jump in any of my current puzzles. So then, you just need to get a good look at the situation and pre-game it before you actually dive in. Do I jump on this thing? Do I whack that thing to activate it? Do I do my really dash move through that gap? Should I hold the jump button a little longer or shorter? Or if there are multiple ways to go, do I get something later on that I can rub on this problem? Remember, the designers wouldn't have made it impossible, and giving up is a zero-sum game. And hey, silly as it sounds, don't be afraid to die a couple times. That's often the best way you can try things out. Just take a breath. You're not in a life and death scenario, you're finding the weird little peg to fit in this, kind of unorthodox hole. Enemies are common in platformers, but due to the design of the game, they tend to be more like just another obstacle. Similarly, you have tricks and tips that you can use against them in the specific order to just rub them out too. A common trap in platformers includes hanging something tempting, such as an extra life or money in such a place that you will kill yourself a lot just trying to get to it. And sometimes you just have to show some restraint and let it go because, you know... Sometimes it's worth taking 2 runs on a game. One for familiarizing yourself with it, and the second for completion, because then you'll have more skills under your belt. For timing-based traps like big smashy things or intermittent gaunts of fire, just going off randomly, pre-gaming is especially important, because you gotta count out the beats until it goes off, let it go, and then you jump right as it begins to reset. Not when it resets, because then it's already too late. Right when it begins to retract, that's when you go. You may get new abilities to incorporate into your inventory, but usually when they're introduced, you get an immediate chance to test them out. So, experiment with them in the same way you experiment with everything else, and get a good feel for it. Remember, these are tools to help you, and they should be fun to use. In fact, if you feel you may not be able to keep track of everything all the time, maybe bring a notepad. I do that with Dark Souls. As the game progresses, the tasks will become more and more complicated. It goes from what item do I rub on this problem to what combinations do I rub on this problem and in what order. Like learning a complicated dance, you may have to fail a few times to get a handle on it. Bounce to rope swing to boing to not boing because that killed me last time to boing to God! Okay, this time I do the same, but then I wait a beat then boing. Altering the timing of a task is generally how platformers ramp up the challenge. They either narrow the window through which you need to do it, or else they force you to pause in a moment where it seems unnatural. And to extend the dance metaphor further, you may have to learn it just one step at a time. Tackle one part of the problem first, rather than taking it as a whole and expecting to just do it all from the get-go. This kind of logic is also why you sometimes see rhythm-based platformers, but that's another thing. If you end up dying a lot and are starting to get frustrated, it might be a good idea to enforce a rule on yourself. Like, I'll give this 3 more tries and then I'm done. Don't force yourself to play until it's no longer fun. Maybe even take a break for a few days before getting back into it. But remember, always find the reason to laugh and smile. I fell down a pit and died in a really goofy way. That action alone can release endorphins and can make the endeavor seem funnier. But as to the mindset for beating the challenge, I think the most important thing to remember is that when you really concentrate, you have more time than you think. You have more time than your panicked senses are telling you. Both when you're standing in place, observing the daunting problem from afar, and when you're in the middle of it. Take a belly breath through the nose, and grit your eyes. Yeah, like an anime character. And just refuse to die. And then somehow, call it dumb luck, divine intervention, or that innate power that I know you have. You emerge far more capable than you ever thought possible. And you stop falling, and you start flying. Okay, with the basics out of the way, let's show off the quest board. This is a list of titles that I believe will make good starting games in this genre. And this is meant only to be a suggestion, as difficulty is a very subjective thing. People have managed to get started with what I think are much harder and much weirder. So, and kid viewers, please stick to the age-appropriate titles. I don't want to get in trouble. Okay, with that, here's a list of good starting platformer games for new players. Once you've got the basics down, and a better idea of what you want out of games like this, decide for yourself what challenge to explore next. Ask a friend, watch a review, or poke around online a bit, and choose a title that seems consistent with what you learned, or something that you think will challenge you towards the next step up. When you're able to set your own goals, the process of getting good becomes much more fulfilling. Next time, I'm going to cover cinematic games, which are another potential good starter pack for the newbie. So, thank you all for tuning in, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and remember, you all have the potential to get good. Peace out.